this is such a heartwarming story. This happened about 3.5 weeks ago, and it was on a work morning, and I had to run over to my daughter's house. She only lives 5 minutes from my home. She and I work together in our skincare clinic. Well, I had to drop something off to her so she could take it into our office, and I was heading to our second office, which is about 28 miles away. So I was rushing around, and it was a really hectic morning. And when I stopped inside her house, she said, "Mom, come in and see Jada's little chinchilla and how cute he is." She said, "I bought him a hammock. I bought him a little sleeping hammock, and I want you to see how cute this is." Well, we went into my granddaughter's bedroom, and this little beautiful silver gray chinchilla was hanging by his arm, by one arm, from this darn hammock. His arm was all twisted up in the hammock, in the end of the hammock, where it was hooked to the cage, and he was just hanging there. And my granddaughter gave out a little scream, and my daughter shrieked, and I poked my finger through the bars of the cage to see if he was alive, and there was absolutely no movement whatsoever. And I said, "Oh my God, Jamie, I think he's dead. I think he's gone." And we all started crying because this little chinchilla was only about 5 weeks old. And my granddaughter had gotten him with her own money that she had saved up for months. And they had only had him about a week. And the pet shop clerk had told my daughter, "Buy this hammock because these little chinchillas love to sleep in these little hammocks." Well, anyway, to continue with the story, I told my daughter, I said, get the cage door open, and it's a real secure cage, and the little door of the cage is like a little trap door, and it was really hard for her to get it open. I couldn't get it open myself, and she knew how to open it. So I'm shrieking at her, "Get the door open, quick." And so she pulled the bars down of the door, and I reached in, and I couldn't feel any life in this little animal at all. So I put one of my hands underneath his body and supported his waist, and I told my daughter, "Untwist this hammock, get this thing off of his arm." So she unhooked it from the bars of the cage, and we pulled the whole apparatus out, and I pulled the little chinchilla out, and we untwisted his arm. Well, all of a sudden, I just felt this electricity go through this little animal when I was holding him next to my heart, and because I had cuddled him up next to my chest while she was untwisting his arm, and I said, "Oh my God, he's not dead. I can feel him. He's alive, Jamie." So we let my granddaughter come back into the room because we had shooed her out of the room because I thought she does not need to see this. She does not need to see her little chinchilla hanging dead in his cage. So we brought her back into the room, and we were all happy, and I sat on the end of her bed, and I just held him next to my chest, and I was just stroking his back and talking to him real quietly, and his eyes were closed. His arm was all swollen, so you could tell there was a whole lot of inflammation. His little left paw was all swollen, and it was just kind of limp. And I said, "Jamie, I'm going home." And we live only 5 minutes from each other, and I said, "I'm going home and I'm getting my wand." And I said, "You hold him, and you hold him close to your body and cuddle him and keep him warm, and I'm going home and I'm going to get my wand." So I ran out of the house, I jumped in my car, and I rushed home, and I got the wand, and I brought it back. I wanded him for 10 minutes, and I thought, "Oh gosh, I'm going to be late to work, but it's going to be worth it." And so I wanded him for about 10 minutes, and his eyes opened, and he started wiggling around in my arms, but his left arm was still just hanging limp. And I thought, "Oh my gosh, he either broke his arm, he's got a broken paw or something." We had no idea how long he had been suspended. His full body weight had been hanging from this one little arm from this darn hammock before we got him out of the cage. We had no idea whether it had been minutes or whether he had been hanging there for an hour or longer, but I wanded him, And then I said, I have to go, or I'm going to be horribly late to work, and my first client's going to be sitting there waiting for me and all upset. So I gave the chinchilla to my granddaughter, who is not even 10 years old, and I said, honey, this is how you wand him. And I want you to wand him about 4 or 5 times each day. You just keep wanding him. So I showed her how to do it, and she kind of practiced, and she showed me that she knew what she was doing. And then I had to leave them and go to work. Well, I told my daughter, I said, call the vet and tell him what happened and get him in for an appointment. She called our vet that takes care of all of our dogs, and the vet said, I'm not a small animal vet. Here's a vet's number that specializes in small animals. So she called this new vet's office, and thank goodness they were open at that hour. And they said, you bring him in at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Well, this whole thing was happening at about 8:20 or 8:30 in the morning. So she took this little animal to work with her in a small little carrying cage and put a little blanket piece in there and, made it all cozy for him. She took him into work. She let her daughter stay home from school because this whole thing was so traumatic. And at 3 o'clock, they took him to the vet, and the vet said, well, I don't think anything's broken. In fact, I believe they took they did take an x-ray, that's right, because Jamie showed me the x-ray and showed me the little arm and the paw and everything. Well, the vet said there is nothing broken, but his shoulder could be dislocated. He could have torn some tendons, and we may have to amputate this whole arm. If we're going to give him about 2 weeks, and if he is not showing signs of using that front leg again in 2 weeks, I'm going to have to take it off because it's just going to atrophy. And Jamie was sick to her stomach. She was heartbroken, but she thought, okay, this little guy's alive, and that's better than being dead. So I had them wanding this little chinchilla. By the way, his name is Houdini. And so they were wanding Houdini at least 5 or 6 times every day. And they kept him in his cage, they kept him warm and everything, and he was eating regularly, so they knew, okay, he's not going to die because an animal that's dying normally doesn't eat or drink. Well, as each day went by, Jamie noticed that the swelling was going down. The vet had given her some medication to help, it was a pain medication. It was also an anti-inflammatory to take some of that swelling down. And as the next few days went by, the swelling started to go down, and she started noticing that Houdini was moving his shoulder. This left front leg was starting to get some movement back into it from up on the shoulder, but the arm and the front paw were still dangling. And he would move around his cage on 3 legs. And then a week went by, and she noticed a little more movement happening. And after about 10 days, now this was within the 2-week period, after about 10 days, she took him back to the vet, and the vet said, this looks really good. There's no blackening. His arm is still healthy looking. I can see the skin on his front paw, and it's still nice and pink and rosy, which means that there's blood circulating in here, and it's getting to the paw. And he said, so let's just wait a few more days and see what happens. And so they waited, and all of a sudden he started putting some weight on his paw. But during this accident, when we got him out of his cage and we disentangled him from the hammock, there was a little part of his toe was just hanging by what looked like almost like a spider web thread. It was just kind of dangling. So I asked my daughter to go get a little cuticle nipper that's very sharp, and I nipped that piece off. Then there was no bleeding or anything. In fact, there was no blood at all at this point. And so I snipped that little piece off, and then of course, I ran and got the wand, and I showed my granddaughter how to wand him. Well, the vet told my daughter, he said, your mom did a really good job, nipping that little end of his toe. He said that was the toe joint that kind of got just cut off, when this this end of the hammock when the cord had wrapped around his leg so badly. Well, I nipped that piece off, and then the vet, when Jamie took him back in about 10 days, the vet said, I'm going to wait just a few more days, let more of the swelling go down. And he said, you know, we'll see within a few days what has to be done. If I have to amputate the leg, I'm going to have to amputate the leg. Well, about 4 or 5 more days went by, and during this time, the wanding was going on each day, about 5 or 6 times a day. And Jada would do this right before bedtime. And he started moving his leg around, not just by the shoulder, but he was putting some weight on that front foot. And each day my daughter would give me a report and tell me, Mom, you know, there's more movement that's showing now. He's actually moving this leg around. So she took him back to the vet for the 3rd time, and the vet said, he's going to get moved. He's going to have a normal arm. He said, all I have to do is snip the rest of that toe joint off that had gotten damaged, and I'm gonna pull the skin over. I'm gonna suture it. So he put like 1 or 2 little stitches in it, and he said, I think that this toe, because that bone had kind of broken on the joint of his toe, and it was like microscopic. He's got such tiny little feet. He said, I think that's why he didn't want to put too much weight on that foot, because his toe was hurting him. Well, once the vet snipped that little toe joint off and stitched it, this little chinchilla was running around my granddaughter's room on the carpeting, jumping. He was washing himself again. So he started rolling around in this little pan of clay and throwing the clay all over and just, you know, bathing himself. And to now, this is like 3.5 weeks later, he jumps about 3.5 feet from the floor up on my granddaughter's bed. He races all over her bed and then jumps down on the floor and runs all over her bedroom, and all 4 of his legs are working beautifully. And the vet said that he said, this is amazing. He said, I'm so impressed with this. He said, you gals took such good care of him. And he doesn't even know that we wanded him. He knows nothing about this wand at all. But he said, I am so impressed with how this little chinchilla has recovered. He said, you girls did such a good job. So, you know, and my granddaughter now has such a relationship with this little animal. Oh, and the vet also said, you know, he's gaining weight, and he's thriving. And so that's basically when the vet saw him the last time, when he had put the stitches in and taken the end of that little toe off. That was the last time the vet needed to see him. That's the good news. This is an amazing story that happened within our own family. And my granddaughter now, she can sit on the rug at the foot of her bed, and she does her homework, and this little chinchilla jumps on the bed, runs around on her bed, and then climbs on her shoulder and sits there, and then he'll climb down the front of her body and sit on her lap and try to take her pencil away. She's in her home. Then he'll steal her crayons, and he'll run around her bedroom with a crayon in his mouth, and then she has to chase after him, and it's almost like he's playing tag with her. The vet, to this day, the vet does not know that, you know, that we used this energy wand on this little chinchilla. He just said, this is an amazing recovery, and I am so glad that he recovered fully. But he said, if you girls, here's what he said. He said, if you girls had not gotten him out of the cage when you did and rescued him, he probably would have died within the next 5 minutes or so, because these little creatures will put themselves in a state of shock rather than allow themselves to be in any horrible pain. And then once they go into shock, they'll die. And this is what he told my daughter. He said, this is how these little animals work. And so we would have had 5 minutes, and we would have found him completely dead, hanging in his cage, had we not, gone into that bedroom. You know, my daughter said, come see the little hammock I bought for Houdini. And if she hadn't told me to do that, or if I had been impatient and said, no, I'm in a hurry, I don't have time, this little animal would have died within 5 minutes. So this is just such a heartwarming story, and my little granddaughter just loves this little animal, and he's such a clever little pet too. He's amazing, and I have to say that we have used our wand for so many different things. Last year, I used it on my horse because he was suffering from laminitis, and he wouldn't come out of his stall. And I would go down every single day and wand him and wand his whole body, starting from his head. And I would go down the length of his spine, and I'd wand all of his legs. And he's a big horse. He's a Mustang, and he weighs about 950 pounds. So it would take me a good 20 minutes to wand him, if not longer. And I've wanded members of my family, my human family, and for injuries. And we use it in our skincare clinic when we're doing skin treatments. And this latest episode, my instincts just hollered at me and said, "Go get the wand."